She seated me in a makeshift box near the kitchen entrance. From there, through the eternally swinging door, I watched my son get married, obscured by a tray of those damn shrimp. I paid for every last detail of this wedding, every bud, every chair. But when the music started and those saccharine toasts began, I was erased from the event, cast aside to the periphery. I plastered on a smile, kept silent, and after the last bite of that cloying cake, I turned it all to ashes with one phone call. No name card, no welcome note, no hint of warmth. Just a folding chair with a crumpled paper napkin on it. My place. Between a mountain of dirty trays and a cart with a screeching wheel that screamed every time someone tried to move it. I froze for a moment, blinking rapidly, trying to chase away the unwelcome tears. The thick, sour smell of marinara hung in the air, pervasive and cloying, mixing with the steam from the kitchen's depths. I could feel the heat of the ovens behind me, and something inside me clenched painfully. I glanced down at my dress, a delicate lilac chiffon, custom made. I'd spent 3 hours at the hair salon that morning. 3 hours convincing myself that this day would be as special for me as it was for them. And not a word. No one mentioned that someone better had been found. Not a single glance in my direction when I walked in, not even from David. Too busy dazzling everyone with his Hollywood smile, adjusting those ridiculous cufflinks, and offering his cheek for the saccharine kisses of her mother, as if she had raised him. As if I hadn't stayed up nights when he was tormented by nightmares. As if I hadn't worked 2 jobs to pay for his braces. And I, apparently, couldn't afford the rent and his damn smile. I clutched my old purse, beige, made of cheap leather, which he had given me for Mother's Day when he still called me Mom. My hands were shaking. I could feel the fine tremor in my wrists, like an electric current trying to break free. This catering boy, a mere kid, not more than 20, forced out an awkward smile. You were told to wait here, ma'am. The bride doesn't want, any visual intersections with the theme. I stared at him blankly. With what? He grimaced and glanced at the swinging kitchen doors. The silver edge slammed against the wall again with a painful thud. A burst of laughter came from the banquet hall, followed by deafening music. Aesthetic compliance with the photos, as he put it. I sank onto the chair, and it creaked mournfully under my weight. Under my feet, right on the floor, a sinister stain darkened. Probably someone had spilled gravy. My shoes stuck unpleasantly when I tried to move them. My gaze slid from my newly painted delicate pink nails to a piece of cold chicken breast, carelessly thrown onto a plate with a chipped edge. And the worst part was, I was silent. Not a sound. Because it was his day. Because I kept telling myself, don't you dare ruin his celebration. Don't be that. Because I paid for everything, naively believing that it meant something. In my hands, I held the program, handed out at the entrance to the church. Elegant cursive on cream paper, and not a single mention of me. Her father walked her down the aisle. Her mother gave the first speech. And I was just the wallet, a ghostly figure in the kitchen bustle, a woman no one wanted to see in the wedding photos. The doors swung open, letting in snippets of music. I saw the orchestra start to play, David and Olivia twirling in their first dance, bathed in the soft golden light of the chandelier. He didn't even glance in my direction. I frantically pressed the napkin to my mouth, pretending to dab away a non-existent stain. My eyes stung. It's from the onions, I told myself. Just steam, kitchen heat. But I knew it was betrayal. My God, it was. And somewhere deep inside my soul, something snapped, quietly and treacherously, like the finest crack running through fragile glass. Imperceptible until the pain gushes out, shattering everything. I stared at the wall opposite me. Right behind the red fire extinguisher, a piece of peeling paint gaped. I looked at it so intently, as if I wanted to burn a hole through it. That peeling patch became my anchor, my only support, a thread holding me back from complete collapse right in front of the waiter carrying those damn crab puffs. Because if I let my emotions take over, if I allowed myself to cry, I was afraid that the flood of tears would never stop. I took a deep breath, then another. The chicken on my plate was completely cold. I didn't touch it. Finally, someone brought out the dessert. I didn't even try it, just watched those layers of white and gold, her colors, her flawless little creation. And then I made the call. It was short, like a stab of a knife and without unnecessary words. I didn't need to justify myself. Just 3 dry cancellations. The flowers for tomorrow's brunch, the second payment to the band, and the open bar that was supposed to buzz until midnight. My voice sounded even, calm, completely controlled, and when I hung up, I didn't feel the slightest remorse. Not a drop. There was no regret. Instead, something forgotten, dormant for years, flared up. Power. I looked at my hands again, calm, not shaking. My heart wasn't pounding like a frightened bird, but humming evenly, like an engine coming to life. The door opened again, letting in bright light, the sounds of laughter, the feeling of life from which I had been cut off. Let them celebrate without me. I have my own plans now. I didn't sleep that night. Not for a second. I lay on the hard hotel bed, still in my evening dress, and stared at the ceiling fan. It spun above me as if it could fall and crash on my chest at any moment. Secretly, I almost hoped it would. My hair still smelled of cooking grease. The scent of expensive roses mingled with the sour smell of sweat. Humiliation was etched into my skin like a second hide. Sometime before dawn, I took off my shoes. My feet were swollen and burning with pain. They had tormented me all evening, but I didn't dare take them off. I had to look dignified, even in the kitchen. 1 o'clock pierced the silence of the room with the red light of the digital clock. The phone on the nightstand sighed again with vibration. Without even looking, I knew what was there. Missed calls from David, from Olivia, a short, horrified message from my niece. What happened? Everyone's shocked. The wedding budget was open on the tablet, my personal nightmare, lovingly nurtured for over a year. I knew every penny, every edit, every whim of Olivia's, delivered with that saccharine smile of hers. And that word she used to cut me like a knife wrapped in silk. More sophisticated. Abigail Miller, we just want something more sophisticated. That's how those damn invitations with hand calligraphy from some hole in Maine came about. That's how the parish hall turned into that pretentious barn with chandeliers and old barrels instead of tables. That's how the bar, instead of regular beer, got a menu of signature cocktails, and the cake grew to 5 tiers, like the Tower of Babel. And I was paying for it all. No one offered to split the costs, not David, not her parents. And I kept silent because I wanted him to have everything I couldn't give him when I was raising him alone. The phone screen flashed, highlighting a list of bank transactions. My heart pounded in my chest as my gaze caught on 2 suspicious transactions. Unauthorized charges that appeared out of nowhere, just days before the wedding. First, a hefty bill from the bar where the wedding drink tasting was held. Then, an upgrade to the rehearsal dinner. That very dinner where I, like a leper, was seated in the farthest corner, almost by the kitchen doors. My stomach churned with nausea. My fingers trembled as I rechecked the card number for the umpteenth time. My card. Used without my knowledge. And then, like a final blow, I saw a message in Venmo addressed to one of her bridesmaids. The groom's mom is shelling out big time. Party on, girls, wedding madness. Tears didn't come. Not a single one. This time, nothing. Just an all-consuming, crushing emptiness, replacing the unbearable pain. My insides seemed to freeze, my nerves shriveled, hiding deep inside, trying to protect themselves from further wounds. Unexpectedly, I reached out and turned on the bedside lamp. The harsh light hurt my eyes. Slowly, as if in a dream, I went to the mirror above the chest of drawers. I was frightened by my own reflection. Under my eyes, runny, smeared mascara. The soft lines of my lips tightened into a hard, unfamiliar crease. My hair, smoothed for sleep, was crushed on one side from the pillow. I looked like I had turned into an old woman overnight. 10 years, stolen by betrayal and lies, were reflected in my faded gaze. But something broke inside, as if a dam had burst, and I finally saw myself for who I was. Quickly tidying myself up, I sat down at the table, and my fingers flew across the keyboard, sending emails, each of which was a breath of fresh air. The first, to the florist. Please cancel the delivery for Sunday. I am withholding the remaining amount. Thank you for your understanding. Each word was like a hammer blow, cutting off the unnecessary. The second, to the musicians. Due to adjustments to the program, the second part of your performance will not be required. Consider the matter closed. No apologies, just a dry statement of fact. The third, to the alcohol supplier. We are reducing the bar's operating hours after the banquet. The second shift is canceled. Do not charge the remaining funds. Clear, concise, without unnecessary words. After clicking send, I felt like a part of me was leaving with those emails, the part that allowed people to walk all over me. Outside the window, the sky was turning from black to pre-dawn blue, and I closed the tablet and, sitting on the bed, listened to the quiet hum of the air conditioner. For the first time in months, I felt like myself. There was no anger yet, just exhaustion. But the limit had been reached. Enough. Enough of being as comfortable as an old sofa. Enough being a walking wallet that everyone just tries to take something from. Enough being the one they remember last, when all the deadlines have already been missed. Let them fend for themselves now. Let them feel what it's like when everything goes wrong. Let them wonder why, when the music suddenly stops, the bartender stops pouring, and the flowers never appear. And maybe, just maybe, then they'll remember who made this damn wedding possible in the first place. A shadow woman in the kitchen, an invisible guest at her own celebration. The music throbbed dully against the walls like echoes of someone else's happiness. I was frozen on this cursed folding chair, clutching a plate of pathetic appetizers and a can of Diet Cola from a soulless catering cooler. I tried not to listen, but in vain. Every burst of laughter, every joyful shout, every crystal chime of glasses, it all mercilessly seeped through the poorly closed door, reminding me of my exclusion. I hear a toast. A male voice, must be her father, or more likely, that hypocrite David, the best man. Stealthily, like a thief, I lean back slightly to peek through the narrow gap. There they are, lined up in front of that stupid floral arch that I, the idiot, paid for. Golden chairs, swaying candlelight, and that fancy neon sign, labored calligraphy. The future is forever. I recognize the voices, even without seeing the faces. Olivia's mother, Jennifer, with her cloyingly sweet falseness. "Oh, David, you're just an angel. Olivia is so incredibly lucky to have you." And that hypocritical laughter, those congratulations, grating on the ears like a knife on glass. I froze, as if paralyzed, unable to move. In the center of the room, like a queen on her throne, sat Jennifer. Dark blue chiffon hugged her figure, and pearls seemed woven into her DNA, although she could only dream of wealth. Before the wedding, we had only seen each other 3 times. Not a single question about my life, not a word of thanks for my contributions, not the slightest hint of financial participation. Next to her, like a suburban monarch, sat Olivia's father, filling the hall with booming laughter. The same man who threw in my face at the rehearsal dinner. "We admire your persistence. Raising David alone must be quite an achievement." Persistence? As if I had conquered Everest and not toiled for years to make sure my son didn't wear hand-me-downs. And there he is. David. My David, smiling like a stranger, squeezed between her parents, as if he had always belonged to this family. My gaze darted to my family. Brenda, my sister, and Sharon, our cousin, sat 2 rows behind, but none of them looked my way. No one. I was superfluous in this celebration of life, a problem that had been pushed into the background. A waitress glided by, a young student, probably. She glanced at my plate and gave a guilty, sympathetic smile. "Anything else for you?" I just shook my head, trying to feign normalcy. "Everything's fine," I whispered, but it was a lie, a monstrous lie. God, how far everything was from fine. Every cell in my body ached with fatigue. My legs were buzzing, my shoulders were burning, my jaw was cramping from tension, and this throbbing pain was radiating from behind my eyes. The heart in my chest was a dead weight, like a piece of rotten meat refusing to beat in a normal rhythm. I stared blankly at the plate. 3 measly olives, a thin slice of brie, a lonely triangle of toast. I hadn't swallowed a bite since breakfast, but now I couldn't even bring myself to look at the food. My stomach clenched into a tight knot, and my throat turned into a narrow, impassable tube. A picture of the seating plan flashed in my head. Several weeks ago, I cautiously asked Olivia, "Have you decided where I'll be sitting yet?" She gave me a strained, unnatural smile. "We're still working on the details. Don't worry, Abigail Miller. You won't be forgotten." I should have guessed. Hell, I did guess. Somewhere deep down, I knew I was just being manipulated, used as a prop, invited for the money, tolerated to create a semblance of decency, but never really wanted around. And the worst thing is, I allowed it myself. I allowed them to nibble away at my role in this farce, giving in time after time. No speech from me, no mother-son dance, because, you see, it might seem awkward. No photos beforehand, not a single mention in the guest list, just a modest place in the kitchen backyard. And suddenly, through the noise, I heard his laughter. David's laughter. That same deep, boyish laugh that he used to laugh when I chased him under the streams of the garden sprinkler. Laughter that I hadn't heard directed at me in forever. Something squeezed my chest. Not sadness, not annoyance, rage. Quiet, sustained, but therefore even more destructive. I got up, silently approached the swinging door, placed my palm on the edge, and gently pushed it, just enough to peek inside. My gaze met Olivia's eyes. She saw me. She knew where I was standing, knew what she had done, and gave me a smile. Not apologetic, not nervous. Calm, confident, as if it should be this way. As if my place was right here, in the shadows. She turned to her bridesmaids, threw her head back, and laughed. And then the realization struck me. This wasn't a mistake, not an accident. It was done on purpose. They planned it, chose it. She didn't want me to be seen. And David allowed it. They both allowed it. And in that moment, something inside me broke irreparably. Didn't break. No, not this time. Just reshaped, taking a completely different place in their lives. And I'm done playing blind, as if I don't see how everything has changed. Let them bask in the spotlight. Let them revel in their champagne. They, naive, thought I was a shadow, invisible. They didn't suspect that I, too, had power, the power to take away. The toast began while I was still standing in the kitchen doorway. The lights dimmed in the hall, and I saw the garlands above sparkle, and the gold charger plates on the tables shimmer in the dim light. The microphone squealed annoyingly, and then her father's voice, as loud as a TV host, boomed through the hall. To our dear daughter Olivia and her wonderful new husband, David. An explosion of cheers. I recoiled. In the kitchen behind me, chaos reigned. Metal trays clattered as if on the eve of a storm. The voices of waiters soared, one of them arguing fiercely about that gluten-free plate for table number 12. I retreated into the shadows, leaning my back against the wall. The cold plaster burned my skin. In the air, the thick aroma of garlic mixed with the smell of hot oil. And on the other side of the door, her father continued, his voice dripping with treacle. When Abigail Miller was a little girl, she dreamed of a fairy tale, of a prince, of a castle, and of a happy ending. Well, darling, today your dream has come true. Another wave of applause deafened me, and then I caught my breath. He was never around when David was little. He didn't see me, exhausted, scrubbing vomit off the tiled floor in the bathroom in the middle of the night. He didn't get to sew torn buttons onto his school uniform hastily, with fingers trembling from fatigue. He didn't make the long and dangerous journey on icy roads just to get him to the chess tournament where David dreamed of winning. But today they were ruthlessly rewriting history, and I was simply erased from it, as if I had never existed. I looked down at my hands again, covered in age spots, with translucent thin skin. They trembled slightly. The cold air from the ventilation above ran a nasty shiver over them. Then it was Olivia's mother's turn. Her voice sounded sweet and fake, like a memorized script. We are so grateful to everyone who shared this special day with us, to everyone who loves Olivia and David. And we are happy to welcome David into our family. He has become like a son to us. An approving murmur swept through the hall. Like a son. Not a single word about me. Not a word about the woman who raised him, who gave him everything. No, thank you for everything, Abigail Miller. No, we appreciate your generosity. No, this day would not have been possible without her. Nothing. Complete, deafening silence. I bit the inside of my cheek until it hurt, feeling the salty taste of blood. My legs ached mercilessly, but I stubbornly refused to sit down, not wanting to show my weakness. Finally, the moment I feared most arrived, the groom's speech. David stepped to the microphone, and he seemed to glow. Strong chin, confident posture, impeccable suit, to which I had contributed. I remembered his first breath in the neonatal intensive care unit, and now he stood before me, dazzling and alien. I just want to thank everyone for coming, he said, and his voice, lower and more polished than I remembered, sounded as if he had rehearsed it in front of a mirror. I am so lucky. Olivia, you have made me the happiest man in the world. And to your family, thank you for accepting me as one of your own. I really feel at home here. A lump in my throat choked my breath. And to everyone who helped make this day possible, thank you so much. This is the most incredible day of our lives. Not once, not a single time did he say my name. I paid for the venue, the catering, the photographer, the DJ, the linens, even that stupid custom-made neon sign. I even paid for the dress Olivia was wearing next to him, holding his hand. And yet, it was as if I didn't exist. The waiters applauded. I remained standing, petrified. Music filled the hall again, and the dance floor came to life. Suddenly, someone handed me a piece of cake on a cheap plastic plate. I stared at it blankly. Vanilla sponge cake soaked in raspberry jam. Her favorite. How I hate raspberries. Never could stand them. A thin gilded fork gleamed in my hand. The hand did not tremble. The memory surfaced of David's 10th birthday, when he, beaming, ordered a chocolate cake with rainbow sprinkles. I was working overtime then, just to buy him that cake from the bakery he always stared at in the window. His eyes, full of delight, are still vivid in my mind. How tightly he hugged me then. That boy is gone. Now he's a man who couldn't even spare a drop of attention to hold a chair for me. I decisively pushed the cake away. I'll wait until the last piece is served, until the guests start to get up, loosening their ties and wiping cream from their lips, until the music reaches its climax. And then, slipping past the kitchen tables, weaving between the waiters, bypassing the bar, I slipped out the side door. The fresh night air was cool. The silence was so profound it rang in my ears. I took out my phone. 3 phone calls, like 3 shots in the silence. To the florist, a curt cancel. To the band, a dry we're not playing. To the bar manager, a sobering the set is off. No apologies, no explanations. By the time I returned to the hotel, the wheel of retribution was already spinning. Tomorrow's brunch is scratched from the program. The night set has vanished into oblivion. The second bartender is sent packing, and with him all those fancy cocktails. I've been silent for too long, letting them revel in their impunity. Let them now feel the gaping void of my absence. Let them be tormented by questions they won't get answers to. I don't care if they think I'm hysterical, vindictive, and ungrateful. They've already torn the page with my name out of their history. Well, I've simply turned the book over. The room smelled of cloying roses and something disturbingly metallic. Maybe it's the smell of stress that permeated my skin. I sat on the perfectly made bed, tucking my legs under me. It seemed no one had touched the blanket since I checked in 2 days ago. No tears were shed. Not a single one. But something inside me froze. Not frozen to the brittleness of ice, ready to shatter at the slightest touch. No, I was hardening, like steel undergoing tempering in fire. Dawn is still far away. I reached for my purse, fumbled for my phone. The screen was plastered with notifications. 6 missed calls, 2 voicemails, a dozen texts. David, where are you? Why was brunch canceled? Mom, this isn't funny anymore, seriously. Olivia, what's going on? Are you okay? Please answer. This is just some childishness. Barely audibly chuckling, I exhaled through my nose. Childishness, huh? I opened the banking app again. My fingers, as if obeying a long-standing habit, automatically dial the necessary combinations, like those who, every Sunday for 30 years, reconciled their checkbook. And there they are. Those withdrawals, brazen, unauthorized, like a slap in the face. My newly minted daughter-in-law, that upstart, shamelessly emptied my card, paying for her bachelorette party and spa day for her bridesmaids. In the itemized receipts, the whole list. Bottles of expensive champagne, manicures and pedicures, face masks, brunch for 8 people. And no one, not a single soul, bothered to ask permission. They didn't even deign to inform me. The trust I had carefully kept in my chest like an old, warm, cozy blanket suddenly turned out to be torn to shreds, as if someone, while I was sleeping, had ruthlessly slashed it with scissors. I switched to email. 2 new messages. The first is from the florist. We are extremely saddened by the sudden cancellation, but of course we understand. According to the contract, a refund is not possible if notification is received less than 24 hours in advance. Perfect. Just wonderful. The second email came from the band manager. We had already started setting up equipment when we received the cancellation. This is unprecedented, but your decision is understandable. The deposit will remain with you. Perfect. Money didn't matter to me. I did it for myself. For that invisible woman sitting on the kitchen chair. For the mother who was erased from an important moment in her son's life. My stomach rumbled with hunger. I hadn't eaten since yesterday, but even the thought of food made me nauseous. Instead, I got up and abruptly pulled back the heavy curtains, watching the sun break through the night darkness. First orange, then pink, and finally, a delicate pale yellow, painting everything around in unreal tones. And then it dawned on me. The little red folder. It's locked in the drawer of my dresser, at home. There are old papers, legal documents, letters I could never throw away. It beckoned me to it, as if it had been whispering my name all this time. Slowly gathering my things, I took a shower, washing away not only the perfume, but also the bitterness of the offense. I dried my hair, put on jeans and a button-down shirt that still faintly smelled of lavender powder. I left the hotel without saying a word. The drive back was shrouded in silence, broken only by the rustling of tires on the asphalt and the barely audible crackle of the radio, broadcasting an unfamiliar melody. In moments like these, you begin to hear your own thoughts, loud, unvarnished by censorship. He didn't say a word about you. They all saw perfectly well where you were sitting, but no one lifted a finger. Pulling up to the house, I noticed the roses I'd planted 2 years ago were blooming profusely. But I didn't stop to admire them. I went straight to the bedroom, threw open the dresser, grabbed the red folder, and slumped heavily onto the bed. Underneath a pile of old insurance policies and photographs I hadn't looked at in years lay a letter. The envelope was yellowed with age, bearing a postmark from Nevada and a date written in my late husband's familiar handwriting. I'd found this letter weeks after he died. Back then, I couldn't bring myself to open it. I simply didn't have the strength. It would have been like pouring salt into a gaping wound, like letting him speak from the grave when I wasn't ready to listen. But now, with a trembling hand, I ran my finger under the flap. The paper was thin, and his handwriting was slanted and so familiar. The letter began simply, Abigail Miller. I know you won't want to hear from me again, but there's something I have to tell you. My heart pounded, my palms covered in a telltale sweat. I'm carrying a secret that weighs on me, preventing me from passing peacefully. You deserve to know the truth. David. He's not your son, not related to you by blood. I found out about it years ago. Olivia was already carrying him when we started dating. I naively believed I could accept him as my own, but the lie ate away at me from the inside, and none of us dared to tell you. I froze, unable to continue reading. The world swam before my eyes for a moment, but I forced myself back to reality. I read to the end. Empty apologies, pathetic excuses, meaningless regrets. Words turned to ash. David, my David, was the fruit of someone else's love, an unexpected guest, thrust upon me by fate as an unbearable trial. But I endured. God help me, I endured. Every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every sleepless shift to buy him new sneakers, to pay for school photos. I passed this test with flying colors, and here I am, cast aside, forgotten, erased from his life. But now I see everything in a new light. The truth burns like a branding iron, piercing years of lies and silence. And the bleeding has finally stopped. I didn't shed a single tear. Not even as I sat there, with the letter trembling in my lap, its weight feeling unbearable, as if all my sorrows were gathered into one sheet of paper. What was the point of crying? Tears had paved David's childhood, paid for his sneakers, his asthma medicine, his first car that he worked so hard to earn. My pillow was wet with tears after his father left, and again when he walked across the high school stage, never once glancing in my direction, never waving to me in the crowd. My tear limit had been reached long ago. Right now, I felt something different. Not bitterness, not heartache, but piercing clarity. I went to the kitchen and filled a mug with black, scalding coffee. Perched by the window, I watched the neighbor's sprinkler, monotonously counting off the seconds on the green lawn. An ordinary Sunday morning. But I was no longer the woman who pays for someone else's dream, receiving only a folding chair and a bowl of punch in return. Not the one who would swallow any insult. Not anymore. I picked up the phone. First thing, the florist. My voice was even, polite. I thanked them for their understanding, feeling a resolve hardening inside me. I confirmed that Sunday's preparations were canceled. No explanations. I wasn't obligated to give any. Next on the list were the musicians. The same even tone, the same evasiveness. Then, the bar. Hello, this is Abigail Miller. Yes, that's right. I'm calling to cancel the cocktail reception at the post-wedding brunch. Yes. No problems. I've just changed my mind. Thank you. Click. 3 calls, 3 broken conversations. I could have stopped, but a premonition of what was to come made me continue. I turned off the phone and turned it back on 5 minutes later. The screen exploded. 38 unread messages, 3 voicemails. Again, David. Mom, where are you? The musicians haven't arrived. What the hell is going on? The voice of Olivia's mother, full of indignation. I don't understand what's going on, but this is outrageous irresponsibility. People are confused. And finally, a message from Olivia herself. Abigail Miller, this is too much. Are you really upset about the seating arrangement? Petty. We had a dream, don't ruin it. Petty? The word stung like a slap, like a brand. And yet, closing my eyes, I could only see her smug grin from across the room, knowing where I was, knowing what she had done, knowing that until this moment, I wouldn't dare resist. I plunged the phone back into the darkness of silence. Let them be gripped by panic. Let the questions multiply like locusts. Let them realize that the bar has emptied, draining my well of generosity. That the music has fallen silent, paid for with the last hard-won note. That the flowers never bloomed, because the roots had long rotted in the soil of my soul. In the silence of my own home, I methodically cleaned the kitchen, polished the countertops until they gleamed, fed my purring companion. For the first time in months, I felt a fragile peace. Around noon, a persistent doorbell shattered the silence. I remained motionless. Let them knock. Let them languish in the heat of their own confusion, in the shadow of my inaccessibility. Later, as night enveloped the city, I posted a single photo on Facebook. Not a wedding snapshot, not a portrait of myself. Just an image of a bank check. The account number blurred out, but my signature, there it was, clear and unmistakable. No words, no explanations, just this silent truth that they wouldn't be able to deny. A receipt for a sacrifice made. And then I logged off. Not just from Facebook. I logged off from the system of guilt, from the suffocating silence, from the hypocritical game of everything's fine after being betrayed. I don't need their pathetic excuses, their false pretenses, their cowardly explanations. Let them wallow in the wreckage of what they've done. I'm not going to save them. The silence that followed was the first, most eloquent sign of their utter bewilderment. They're confused, and that's my revenge. An oppressive, ominous silence, like the eye of a hurricane, frozen right above my head. Not a single message, not a sound of a phone call, just this crushing emptiness. I felt it on my skin, the tension, the anticipation, like a beast lurking in ambush. They were wondering what I would do next, and I didn't know myself. But whatever it was, it would be mine. On Monday, as dawn barely broke, I made strong coffee and took my post by the window again. No makeup, no jewelry, just me, a new day, and the monotonous hum of the refrigerator, like an accompaniment to my resolve. David had been silent since yesterday. His last voice message was etched in my memory with its brevity, harshness, even a kind of frightened defensiveness. "Mom, you've made a real circus out of this. That's all anyone is talking about. You've made us a laughingstock. I don't understand what you were trying to achieve, but you've crossed the line." I didn't even flinch, listening to his words. Because here it is, the bitter truth that no one dares say aloud. You can give a person everything, time, money, love, and still be nothing more than expendable. You can build a whole world for them, and in return, you hear that you don't fit into their aesthetic. Betrayal no longer surprised me. What really struck me was how little it affected me, especially now that I had stopped. You loved him madly, to the last cell. But the bitter truth is that he wasn't your flesh and blood. He was another man's son. So what? You still made him your universe. I don't know what you're feeling right now, reading this, but I pray, God, I pray that you know, whatever I did, I was right to choose you. You are the only one strong enough to be his mother. Not because of blood, but because of who you really are. I froze, as if struck by lightning. These words crashed down on me like a stone block, pinning me to the ground. Not a biological son, not even a random one. Chosen by the man who betrayed us both. He foisted a child on me and then ran off, as if he were doing me a favor. I gasped for air, for the first time in days. My legs turned to jelly. I collapsed on the edge of the bed, crumpling the letter in my hand. In my head, like a slideshow, memories flashed. The first time I rocked Ethan Miller, his tiny fists clutching my blouse at the shoulder. His first word, truck, spoken with such importance. That terrible fever when, crazed with fear, I carried him barefoot to the hospital in the middle of winter. The science project with the erupting volcano, over which he sobbed when it refused to work. The first real childish tragedy that broke his heart. The burst of laughter when the college acceptance letter arrived. All these moments that I naively considered ours. I built my life around this boy, erected my identity on the foundation of motherhood. And now I had to accept what no woman should have to accept. He never saw me as a person. He liked what I gave, my care, my support, but not me, myself. Not really. If he had loved me, he wouldn't have let her push me into this kitchen, into this corner. He wouldn't have been silent, watching them erase me from his life. I put the letter on the bed, smoothed the yellowed sheet with my palm. There was no longer a burning pain of betrayal, only an intoxicating sense of freedom. For 62 years I had lived playing a role created to serve others. Wife, mother, provider, a disembodied ghost. But now, as this bitter truth stared at me from the old ink lines, I saw something new in myself. There was a strength in me that I didn't even suspect, a strength born out of boundless love for someone who never belonged to me. And that love, despite everything, never stopped me. I stayed when others ran away, because here I built my family, even if not by blood. And now I can start all over again. Right now. The letter lay open on the kitchen table. No hiding places, no locks. Just open truth that no longer needed to be concealed from myself. I wandered through the house as if seeing it for the first time. Beige walls, faded photos of Ethan Miller from his school graduation, a dent in the doorframe, a memory of his reckless bicycle ride. This dent used to bring a smile, now only empty contemplation. This house is a museum of my sacrifices. Every item reminded me of how I erased myself to preserve his integrity. The faded armchair where I fed him, the sewing kit with which I hemmed his trousers, the pantry crammed with his favorite honey bunches of oats. Suddenly, an awareness pierced me. I don't even remember what cereal I like. I don't know what the last book I read for myself was, rather than from a list of children's literature or hospital recommendations. I could barely recall the last time I treated myself to something just for the sake of it, for my soul. The years devoted to motherhood had blurred the line between me and that role. I had almost forgotten how to be a woman, an individual. Pouring myself a glass of water, I sank onto the sofa. The silence in the house seemed transformed, no longer oppressive, but somehow sincere. A sudden vibration from the phone on the bedside table broke the peace. Ethan Miller again. This time, a long message, and the tone was completely different. I don't understand what happened. I've been thinking a lot about all of this. Olivia said she didn't mean to hurt you. I'm so sorry if you felt left out. If I felt, not because you excluded me, left me behind. Even in his apology, he managed to talk about his feelings, his comfort, about trying to distance himself from guilt. There wasn't the slightest desire to reply. Instead, I grabbed the remote and turned on the television. The muted hum of a cooking show filled the room, even and soothing. My gaze fell again on the phone screen with his message. He wasn't my son, neither by blood nor by law. But I was his mother until he made it clear that there was no longer a place for me in the family he was building. And the pain that burned inside me was no longer about him. It was an echo of the me I had left behind to raise a person who never once turned around to ask, "Mom, are you okay?" All these years, every birthday I turned into a celebration. Every Christmas morning, when I stayed up until midnight, tirelessly crafting gifts from a cheap store, creating perfect bows. All those days when I dreamed of hearing, "Go rest, I'll do the dishes." But no one ever offered. I was his background music, his insurance, his reliable silence. But that has come to an end. That evening, I took down all our framed photos from the wall, not out of anger, not out of resentment, but because it was time to leave. This temple of the version of motherhood that demanded my disappearance. I carefully folded them into boxes, wrapping the glass in old towels, and labeled them memories, not obligations. I cooked dinner just for myself, a recipe once seen on a cooking show. Lemon pasta with butter, roasted cherry tomatoes, and garlic. No chicken nuggets, no macaroni and cheese side dish, just what I wanted. The soft light of a candle flickered on the walls as I dined. Jazz flowed from the speakers, enveloping the room in warmth. The table was set only for me, but there was no loneliness in the silence. Rather, it was the sound of the return of something important, something I didn't even realize I had lost. The guest list began with a silent sheet of yellow paper. No fancy invitations, no gold calligraphy, just a simple lined notebook and the scratching of my pen. I wrote down the names one by one, not those who should be invited, but those who I wanted to. Ashley, my combat buddy from the emergency room, who secretly slipped me coffee into my locker when I worked around the clock. Mr. Johnson, the neighbor who always cleared the snow in front of my house without waiting for me to ask. Tiffany from the bookstore where I stop by every Sunday. She is always genuinely interested in my week and, more importantly, listens. Nurse Jessica, who once, on her own birthday, stayed late to help me finish my shift. None of them were blood relatives, but each of them gave me the feeling that I was seen and valued, which I never felt from my own son. And here it is, a new chapter. Not a wedding, not an anniversary, but just a humble dinner in my home, with my food, at my table. No folding chairs, no kitchens hidden from view. For several days I conjured up dishes, not striving to impress, but simply because I wanted to. For the first time in years, I was cooking not for someone else's story. This was not about Ethan Miller, not about redemption, not about proving anything. It was about creating space for my own joy. I went to the market and personally selected the products. Fresh basil, garlic, juicy heirloom tomatoes. No frozen, semi-finished products. I even bought a new tablecloth, blue, with sunflowers. She reminded me of what I loved in my 20s, before all these shoulds started building brick walls around my life. On the day of the dinner, I woke up before dawn and turned on music while I cooked. Van Morrison, Stevie Nicks, Norah Jones. My house filled with the aromas of garlic, olive oil, and lemon zest, warmth, diligence, coziness. A real home. The first guest arrived at the door a little before 6. Ashley, beaming and holding a bottle of red wine, exclaimed, "Maggie, you look absolutely radiant." And I actually felt that way. Hair touched with silver at the temples flowed freely over my shoulders, lending me confidence. A linen blouse felt pleasantly cool against my skin. No shapewear, no fear of mascara smudges, just me. The other guests trickled in soon after. 6 people. Bursts of laughter at the door, long, heartfelt hugs, wine flowing freely without question. We sat down at the table that once served as my laundry folding station and Ethan Miller's dreaded math homework spot. Now it was laden with various dishes, clinking with forks, and napkins were constantly dabbed at lips, trembling with laughter. I laughed along with everyone. Real, genuine laughter. We reminisced about ridiculous first date stories. Someone confessed to weekly pen theft from the bank, just out of spite. And somewhere between dessert and seconds, it suddenly dawned on me. This is family. Not the kind given by blood, but the kind chosen by the heart, consciously and sincerely. I didn't feel forgotten. No one was trying to control me. I didn't feel small and insignificant. I felt present. I felt my worth. As the evening drew to a close, as we settled under the twinkling fairy lights on the back porch, Ashley raised her glass. "To Abigail Miller," she proclaimed. "To a woman who proves that it's never too late to sit at the head of your own table." The clinking of glasses filled the room. I chuckled softly, and putting all my soul into every word, raised my glass. To finally being seen. A knock on the door echoed precisely at noon. Not insistent, not demanding, but measured, as if the person behind the door knew I was home and was willing to wait as long as necessary. Barefoot in the hallway, I peered at the blurry silhouette behind the frosted glass. Ethan Miller. A week had passed since the wedding. 7 days of my silence. 7 days of his agonizing attempts to understand. Slowly turning the knob, I opened the door. There he stood. The same, yet something was different. No suit, no former sparkle in his eyes. He wore a rumpled t-shirt, and dark circles lay under his eyes. Seeing me, he seemed to swallow hard. His lips twitched, as if he had rehearsed dozens of different ways to start this conversation, and instantly forgot them all. "Hi, Mom." I remained silent. Stepping aside, I led him into the house. He hesitated for a moment, then, tentatively stepping over the threshold, walked past me. The house was clean and quiet. Sunlight generously flooded the living room, playing on the parquet floor. The mantelpiece was bare. Not a single photograph. He noticed it immediately, his gaze darting across the exposed spots where they should have been. "Where are the photos?" The question came out sharply. I pretended not to hear. "Sit down," I said evenly, trying to remain calm. He obediently lowered himself into the armchair opposite. Silence pressed down, words caught in the throat. Finally, he sighed heavily and ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't come here to argue." I nodded silently. "Okay. He cut himself off, shaking his head. "I don't understand what happened. One moment everything was perfect, and the next you cancel the wedding, post the receipts on Facebook." His words stung. Not a single question about how I was doing, not a word of regret. Only a demand for explanations. I got up and, going to the closet in the hallway, took out a box. I carefully placed it on the coffee table between us. "What's this?" he asked with bewilderment. "Receipts," I replied. "Every single one from the last 12 months. Deposits for the venue rental, dress fittings, prepayment for the catering company. I even paid for that extra dance floor you wanted so badly, remember?" His gaze slid over the papers, but didn't linger on any of them. Then I pulled out the next item. He froze, his gaze riveted to the envelope. His father's handwriting, unmistakable. I remained silent, watching him open the letter, watching the expression on his face change. First, bewilderment, then a glimmer of recognition, and finally, a slowly creeping shadow, disbelief. He looked up at me, and a tremor entered his voice. "You knew?" "Now I know," I replied, trying to remain calm. He swallowed, as if a lump in his throat made it difficult to breathe. "So, you're angry because I'm not yours?" I interrupted him, putting into every word the pain and resentment that had accumulated over the years. "I'm not angry because you're not my biological son, Ethan Miller. I'm angry because I raised you. I gave you everything I had. And when it was time to give me credit, to stand up and say, "This woman made me who I am." You chose to sit down. He hung his head, the silence thick with unspoken words. You let them shove me into the kitchen, I continued, and to my surprise, my voice remained even, without a hint of hysteria. You watched them diminish me, and you said nothing. That's what broke me, Ethan. Not your DNA. Not the money. He mumbled something, barely audible. I didn't think it mattered. Olivia said it would be better for the photos, for the image. I didn't think it would hurt you. A cold, short laugh escaped my lips. You didn't think at all. I rose and walked to the mantelpiece. My fingers brushed against one of the empty frames. There used to be a picture of you here, from kindergarten graduation. Remember? Toothless grin and a shirt covered in marker. You ran off that stage straight into my arms. I turned the frame face down. I'm not holding on to those versions of you anymore. He flinched as if struck. Mom, no. I cut him off, my voice like steel. I'm not your background anymore, not your ATM, not your problem-solving app. He looked down, his jaw tightening, betraying his inner struggle. A slow nod. I'm sorry, he whispered, like exhaling. Too quiet. Too late. I picked up the box, snapped the lid shut, and held it out to him. This is yours. Take it. All the receipts, the records, every reminder of what you chose to ignore. He hesitated, but then he took the box. I walked him to the door. On the threshold, he turned, his eyes searching desperately for the smallest crack in my resolve. A glimpse of the softness that used to be, a sign that this door could one day open again. But it wouldn't. You always said I was your whole world, he said, almost inaudibly. You were, I confirmed, looking straight into his eyes. But now, I finally belong to myself, and I closed the door. The house throbbed with life, filled with infectious laughter that rose from the very depths of the soul, making the eyes involuntarily squint with joy. This laughter, like music, spilled through the rooms, reminding everyone of the most precious thing, that you are here, you are alive. The aroma of garlic and rosemary wove a magical dance, swirling in the air. The table was set with love and attention to every detail. A bright tablecloth in blue and sunflower tones, mismatched plates, cloth napkins folded into elegant fans. In the center of the table, I lit a candle. Not for show, but simply because I loved how its flickering light made the silverware sparkle and play. My guests, settled in the living room, leisurely sipped wine and shared stories with each other. Mr. Johnson, standing in the corner, was enthusiastically recounting how he once managed to lock himself out of his house in nothing but his underwear. An explosion of laughter rang through the room. Ashley even teared up from laughing. And me? I stood barefoot in the kitchen, a glass of wine in my hand, and smiled. Not waiting to be called, not hiding behind the door, not feeling forgotten. I was the hostess of this evening. I was present here and now. I was seen. Content, I arranged the last dish, fragrant roasted vegetables with thyme and sea salt, and carried it into the living room, feeling part of this moment. When I placed it on the table, applause erupted. Chef Abigail Miller has worked another miracle, Ashley proclaimed with a radiant smile. We sat down, passing around fragrant bowls, generously pouring wine. Somewhere between the second plate and the last delicious piece of cornbread, Ashley raised her glass again. I think we should make a toast, she suggested. Everyone nodded in agreement. To what? Tiffany asked. Ashley turned to me, her eyes glowing with warmth. To the courage to choose yourself, she said, and to the wisdom to stop giving to those who only know how to take. Everyone, as one, raised their glasses, and I finally fully raised mine as well. In a unified impulse, I stood up. Not a trace of trembling in my hands, not the slightest hesitation in my voice. I looked at every face around the table, the faces of people connected to me not by bonds of duty or blood, but by free choice, sincere love, deep respect. And I spoke, enunciating each word. To the mothers who have been silent for too long, to the women who have given everything and heard in response that it is still not enough. To those who were asked to stay in the kitchen after they built this damn house with their own hands. To us. May we never sit down again, unless it is at the head of our own table. The crystal clink of glasses, joyful exclamations. I sank back into my chair, not in the shadows, not in a forgotten corner, not in exile, but in my place, at my table. Ethan Miller would not bother me with a call anymore, and he didn't need to. Everyone who really mattered was already here, nearby. Morning burst into the room with birdsong and golden light. Not a trace of regret, not a crushing weight in my chest, only peace. Having brewed coffee, I stepped out onto the porch. The light robe fluttered in the breeze, like wings. My gaze drifted across the garden. Roses blazed with vibrant colors, having grown profusely. No longer an extra, not a blurred background in someone else's story. I am the main character, in my own life. And finally, that is enough. Finally.